3. How's it going, everybody? Today on Johnny B's and Himir's Kitchen, which is actually, this is the first episode of it, we are going to make a little bit of Saxon bread. Now, give you a little premise for the whole show. If this pilot episode works out, we're going to cook foods from history, mainly Norse and Scandinavian, Icelandic history, English, Scottish, other Gaelic foods and stuff. So, join me today as we make Saxon bread on Himir's Kitchen. Here we go. Let's move it over here. Let's get closer. So, give you a little bit. Let's talk about who Himir is. Himir was in Norse mythology. He was the divine chef of the gods. And every day, he prepares all the food for the feast, the Saminir, and everything for the warriors of Valhalla. He makes all the food for them every day, him and his team, right? But he is the divine chef of the gods, so I thought it was only appropriate to name the show as such. Let's talk about what we're making. We're making Saxon bread. Now, you may have seen this bread in like historical movies or fantasy movies like Game of Thrones, where, you know, there's that loaf and they're just tearing it apart and making it. Well, it's a really good bread. It's super simple to make, and it's got like a light sourdough to it. So, you know, let's just dive right in and get to making it, all right? Because if this idiot can make it, anybody can make it. It's true. It's true. And today's show is brought to you by Tinsley Printing. Tinsley Printing. If you need swag for anything, koozies, shirts, stickers, cups, whatever it is, get a hold of Lacey Tinsley. She'll make them right up for you. Now, and I'm not saying when you're cooking, especially the bread, that beer enhances the flavor of the foods, but I'm not saying it doesn't. Stick with me on that. All right, guys. So, all you're going to need for this is some bread flour. Now, bread flour is different than all-purpose flour. You're going to need some of that too. But main ingredient, bread flour, salt, honey, and active yeast. Now, the yeast I like to use is the Fleischmann's instant dry yeast. Now, if you bake or if you cook, use whatever yeast you like. I really like Fleischmann's. Comes in a big enough bag. I do a lot of bread making and stuff. So check that out. So the first thing we're gonna do is get our bread flour. And don't worry, I'm gonna post all the instructions and everything at the end of the video. Okay? Stick with me. So we're going to want our bread flour. The other thing about this, like I said, it's super simple to make. But it's also, once it rises, it cooks relatively fast. So normally I make this stuff at night, let it rise overnight, and then, you know, bake it first thing in the morning. But you really only have to let it rise about 3 hours. Now, it depends on the temperature in your house. But most houses, you only need to let it rise for about 3 hours, 4 hours. The longer you let it rise, the better, but I wouldn't go over about 8 hours. That's a little too long. So, you know, optimal is 3 to 6. So usually I make it at night, put it in, you know, about 11. I get up about 6, have coffee, and then put it in the oven. So stick with that. So we're gonna need 4 cups of bread flour. There's 1. You know, if the show does well, I'll get a better kitchen setup and a sous chef to wash dishes. 2 cups, 3 cups. And 4 cups of flour, of bread flour. Now, you can use any bread flour. It doesn't have to be gold medal or anything, just whatever you like, but it's got to be bread flour. The next thing we're going to do is put in 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Now, I like iodized sea salt because, you know, back in the day, where'd they get their salt from? You know, Scandinavia, Norway, all that in that area, from the ocean. And from trade, of course. But so I like the iodized sea salt. So we're gonna need a 1.5 teaspoons of this. There's 1. I'm using 1/2 teaspoon here. There we go. So there's our salt content. Now, we've got that there. We've got to mix that up really good. But before we do that, let's get our yeast going. And like I said, this is kind of a light yeast bread. It's really good, especially if you make some homemade butter. Any butter's good, but make some homemade butter, which we'll do that in another episode. We'll make sure we have some bread on call and make some homemade butter. So we've got our flour and our salt in here. You just want to mix that together real well, right? Get that salt as integrated with that flour as you can. Now I do my damnedest to not make a big mess. Doesn't really work out, but I try, you know. But at least I do my best to clean it up. All right, so there's that. So whatever you want to do your flour or your yeast in, do this. We're gonna need 2 tablespoons of the yeast. All right. So we're gonna start getting our water hot. Warm, really. Not hot, but warm. Start getting our water warm. And we're gonna dish ourselves out. Now, if it's a heaping tablespoon, it's okay. You don't have to be exact with the yeast. Now, I do like to throw in a little bit of an extra, so maybe it's like 2 1/4 teaspoons. You know what I'm saying? One of the things that's really important in this recipe is making sure, and like most bread recipes, is to get that your yeast to activate. Now, I need a little bit warmer. We'll turn that down a little bit. Okay, the next big thing, bada bing, bada boom, is the honey. So you put your yeast in, and you want yourself about 2 tablespoons of honey. Now, honey is a silly mistress. There we go. There we go. So, even if you have honey in the cabinet and it's crystallized, just put it in some warm water, let it break down. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll put that over there out of the way with my rag. All right. So now we're going to fill this up, just to start with, for this yeast, to about a cup to a cup and a half of water, of the warm water. You may need a little bit more, you may need a little bit less. It just depends. All right, we'll do that. Put that right there. And now give it a good mixing. Get it all mixed up. I love this bread. And it's really good. Like, when you make this bread, it's a good sized loaf, and then sometimes you slice it up, and it's really good to make garlic bread out of, or little individual pizzas. You know, whatever. That's right. And all right, we got that mixed up real good. So we're gonna let that set there for a minute, and while that sets there, we're gonna take a drink. Now, on the yeast too, it is important. It has to be active yeast, active dry yeast. It's got to be that. Like I said, I don't care what kind you use. That's what it's got to be. So we're gonna let that set up for a minute, and then we'll get to mixing and kneading. And the kneading part's one of my favorite parts, really, because if you got any kind of aggression or frustration, take it out on the bread. You know what I'm saying? All right, we'll be right back.